Jason returned home from war with prosthetic legs, only to be humiliated by a guard. But the real lesson came when Chuck Norris boarded the flight. Daylight slanted through the airport's glass walls as Jason Harper stepped off the shuttle, each prosthetic blade clicking against the tile like a steady drumbeat. He paused at the threshold, letting the noise of rolling suitcases and distant flight announcements wash over him. After 12 months in Afghanistan, the familiar chaos felt both foreign and comforting. A deep breath filled his lungs. Home was just beyond those gates. Take a second to subscribe. It really helps. Thanks. Now back to the story. His uniform jacket draped over one shoulder, the old desert tan fabric swapped for a simple hoodie and jeans. His duffel bag weighed more from memories than gear. Letters from friends, photos of birthdays he'd missed, the dog-eared paperback he read by flashlight on patrol. He glanced down at his legs, the carbon fiber blades molded to his stumps. They weren't just replacements. They were reminders of a day when everything changed. But today they carried him toward something stronger than loss. Faces blurred as he threaded through travelers, many casting curious glances. Some offered sympathetic smiles. Others quickly looked away, unsure how to meet a man shaped by service and sacrifice. He flexed his knees, adjusting to the rhythm of human traffic. Every rising footstep brought him closer to the little waiting area where his sister and her daughter would be watching. Ahead, he spotted a blue banner reading "Welcome Home." His heart thumped a new cadence, hope. He slowed, letting anticipation settle in his chest like a warm weight. A small girl in a bright pink coat spun around, her curls bouncing, and then she broke free from her mother's grip, sprinting toward him, arms outstretched. His sister's eyes shone behind her mask as she called his name. Jason bent, blades humming lightly, and caught his niece before she piled him backward. Her laughter echoed in his ears the way it used on backyard adventures. His sister pressed against him, tears dampening his hoodie. For a moment, the war melted away, replaced by sticky hugs and the scent of cinnamon from pastries she'd brought. He straightened, vanishing the ache of distant sandstorms with a smile. This was what he'd fought for, the soft echo of family, the quiet power of return. He would walk forward, one click at a time, into everything he'd missed. The steady tap of carbon fiber blades echoed through the concourse as Jason navigated toward the security checkpoint. Each step announced his arrival. No smooth glide of flesh and bone, but a rhythmic signature that set him apart. Rather than shrinking from the attention, he moved with quiet purpose, flexing at the hips to absorb the click of each footfall across polished stone. Travelers glanced twice, some startled, others intrigued by the precision of motion he'd mastered. He'd learned to control the pitch of those blades, lifting just enough to clear thresholds, adjusting pressure to soften the impact. What once felt mechanical had become an extension of himself, an emblem of resilience carved in sleek graphite. At the edge of the line, he paused to rearrange his bag, noticing the reflection of his silhouette in a steel column. Broad shoulders, hoodie pulled tight, and those unmistakable legs. He remembered the day he first stood on them, how uncertainty jittered through his core. Now balance came from muscle memory, from late nights relearning how to walk, run, even dance on tile after tile. Security agents directed him forward, and he met their eyes with a calm nod. He'd seen suspicion flare when blades appeared, but he refused to bristle. His service had taught him that strength often spoke more loudly in stillness than in resistance. So he walked on, shoulders squared, letting the rhythm carry him past families and business travelers alike. Just beyond, a uniformed guard leaned against his station, arms crossed, and smirking at Jason's approach. The tap-tap-tap grew louder as he closed the distance, each step a testament to the battles he'd fought and the ones he'd choose again to stand this tall. Jason placed his duffel and boarding pass on the counter, blades tapping softly as he shifted his weight. The guard behind the desk, a burly man with a crooked grin, leaned forward, arms braced on the laminate surface. He squinted at the boarding pass, then glanced down at Jason's legs as if seeing a carnival sideshow for the first time. A low chuckle rumbled in his throat. "Hey, buddy," the guard said, voice rough like gravel. "Mind telling me how many parts are under there?" He slapped the desk with one fist, laughing loudly enough for nearby passengers to look up from their phones. 5? 6? More. His smirk widened. Jason steadied himself, hands flat on the counter. He'd anticipated stares, maybe awkward questions, but humiliation stung sharper than any battlefield insult. He met the guard's gaze, voice even. "Just what I need to get me through security." He smiled thinly, unwilling to give his tormentor the satisfaction of a reaction. The guard's laughter turned coarse. He leaned even closer, breath smelling of stale coffee. "Don't play tough. You sure those things can't hide a little something extra? Maybe drugs, weapons?" His eyebrows rose in mock curiosity. A hush fell over the line of travelers. Jason felt their eyes flick between him and the guard, some concerned, others morbidly curious. He unclipped his ID holder and slid it across the desk. "I'm clean," he said. "Just doing my job." The guard snorted, rifling through Jason's paperwork. "Well, let's be sure," he said, picking up Jason's carry-on. With a practice shove, he sent it spinning onto the X-ray belt. Metal clicked, and whirred inside the machine. Jason held his breath, every pound of his past, metals, scars, loss, pressing at his chest. The guard slapped the bag's end. "Looks empty," he sneered, sliding the belt to the scanner. "Lucky you." He tossed the pass back onto the counter and waved Jason forward. "Go on then. Try not to trip on those fancy new legs." Jason swallowed the insult, picked up his belongings, and moved beyond the desk, forging ahead through the scanner's hum. The guard's laughter echoed behind him, but Jason held his head high. He knew what those blades really carried, every hard-earned step of his life. Jason stepped away from the scanner and into the bright corridor, letting the hum of the machines fade behind him. He gathered his duffel with a steady hand, adjusting the strap over his shoulder as if claiming quiet victory. The guard's laughter still trailed him, but he refused to look back. Every click of his blades on the linoleum felt like a declaration. He belonged here as much as anyone. He found a bench near the departure boards and sat, folding his arms across his chest to cradle the slight ache in his hips. Around him, business travelers checked laptops, families chased toddlers, and the scent of coffee drifted from a nearby kiosk. In that swirl of movement and noise, Jason closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He drew in a slow breath, recalling how he'd learned to rise from pain after the blast, once with screaming agony, now with quiet resolve. This was no battlefield, but the humiliation of prejudice still stung. Yet he would not give it power. When he reopened his eyes, he spotted a mother gently guiding her child across the hall. The little boy looked up, curious at Jason's blades, but instead of fear or mockery, his gaze held simple wonder. Jason offered a small wave, and the boy returned it before tumbling after his mother. That brief exchange reminded Jason why dignity wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about refusing to shrink. A sudden buzz in his pocket broke his reverie. He checked his phone, a text from his sister confirming her plane landed 2 gates down. He tapped a quick reply and rose, securing his bag. The guard's smirk would be forgotten soon, replaced by more important things. Laughter with family, the comfort of home-cooked meals, the soft embrace of people who saw him as he truly was. Jason moved on, each step deliberate and calm. The click of carbon fiber, a metronome of strength. His silence spoke louder than any retort could. He carried himself with the quiet pride of someone who had faced life's worst and refused to be defined by it. And as he walked toward his sister, he knew that no guard's mockery could ever erode the dignity he wore beneath those blades. Jason sank onto the hard plastic bench beside Gate 42, the glow of the departure board reflecting in his eyes. His boarding time had passed 20 minutes ago, and the word delay pulsed beside his flight number. He tapped his watch and then his phone, fingers jittering despite the steady click of his prosthetic blades against the tile. A uniformed agent stood nearby, clipboard in hand, flipping back and forth between pages as though waiting for something more important than him. When the agent finally approached, he cleared his throat. "Your flight's been delayed for maintenance," he said, voice flat. "We'll let you know when boarding resumes." Jason nodded, masking the disappointment itching at his chest. He flexed at the socket of his left blade, trying to shift weight and ease the tension that had coiled there since the guard's cruel jokes. Around him, passengers adjusted their plans. Business people phoned for ride changes. Families corralled children toward concession stands, and a father in a wheelchair was ushered through a nearby priority lane. Jason watched it all, everyone moving forward while he stayed stuck in limbo. The delay was supposed to be routine, but he felt it as a sting of exclusion, a reminder that even here, normalcy could slip from his grasp. His phone buzzed again, his sister's message telling him she'd just landed at gate 38 and would head over soon. Relief bloomed in his chest, but it was tempered by the knowledge that every stalled minute stretched the memory of humiliation thinner across his nerves. He took a breath and leaned back, absorbing the hum of the terminal. He reminded himself that delays came and went, but his determination remained. He glanced at the boarding column. Still delay. He closed his eyes, picturing home, his niece's laughter, his sister's cinnamon coffee. He would move forward, no matter how long the wait, trusting that one click at a time would carry him out of this holding pattern and into the welcome he'd fought so hard to earn. The rumble of the delayed engines awakened something deeper in Jason's chest, dragging him back to a dust-choked Afghan dawn. He closed his eyes, and the terminal's fluorescent glare dissolved into the blinding glare of desert sun. He was crouched behind a crumbling wall, adrenaline pounding in his ears louder than any bomb. The chatter of his squad crackled through his earpiece. "Clear on your side," his partner had said. "Move up." Jason rose on unsteady legs, scanning the horizon. Then the blast, a violent roar like the world splitting in two. Heat seared through him, and the wall exploded into fragments. Pain crashed in waves, hot, blinding, final. He remembered falling backward, blades of glass burying into his stumps, blood pooling beneath him. He could still taste metal in the air. A voice shouted, urgent but distant, "Corpseman, we need the corpseman." He fought to raise his arm, vision swimming. The faces around him blurred. He couldn't shout. His legs, no longer there, left him weightless and terrified. A medic's hands pressed down on the wound, murmuring reassurances he couldn't hear. Everything went silent, then faded to black. Jason opened his eyes in the airport, chest tightening. The guard's laughter replayed, merging with the echo of mortar fire. He touched the smooth curve of his left blade, marveling at how far he'd come since that day. Prosthetics and therapy had rebuilt him, but the memory still lay just beneath his skin, a wound that refused to heal completely. He forced himself upright, gripping his duffel strap until his knuckles whitened. Around him, travelers bent toward their own worlds, lovers hugging goodbye, colleagues tapping on screens. No one saw the invisible scars he carried. Yet every step he took now was a choice, to move forward despite the pain. Taking a deep breath, Jason scanned the gate board again. The word delay still glowed in orange, but he was no longer stalled. He stood and lifted one blade, then the other, ready to face whatever came next. A ripple of murmurs drifted through the terminal, soft at first, then growing like a gathering tide. Jason paused beside his gate, watching travelers lean in to one another, phones discreetly raised. He caught snippets. "Heard he's on this flight. Saw him by the coffee stand. Chuck Norris, can you believe it?" Faces lit up at overheard confirmations, and cameras clicked behind cupped hands. Jason glanced around, curious despite himself. He'd grown accustomed to attention, both respectful and curious, but this was different. The name carried weight, silent toughness woven into pop culture lore. Across the hall, a man in a tailored suit whispered into his phone, voice hushed. A teen huddled with friends, scanning the crowd. Even the flight attendants moved with a certain energy, exchanging glances that suggested they were serving more than regular travelers today. He continued to pack and repack his bag, pretending not to notice, but his heart stumbled at the thought. What would it be like to share a terminal with a man whose reputation transcended mere fame? A living symbol of discipline and heroism. For Jason, whose own life had been marked by sacrifice, the idea felt strangely fitting. Both had faced battles. Both carried scars that spoke louder than medals. A flight board flash announced final boarding for Gate 42, and the buzz crescendoed. The crowd edged forward, excitement rippling through the fluorescent-lit space. Jason slipped into line, blades tapping, as a uniformed attendant raised her hand and smiled knowingly at the passengers behind him. Cameras peeked over shoulders. Whispers hissed. He felt a warm pulse of anticipation, less for the flight ahead and more for the chance to witness something true amid the everyday rush. Whatever awaited beyond the gate, he imagined it wouldn't be just another journey. It might be the moment when legend and reality converged, and he'd be there to see it. Jason eased through the glass doors into the airline lounge, expecting calm but finding tension instead. Plush chairs and low lighting promised refuge, yet hushed conversations rippled across the room. Travelers clustered near the windows, eyes flicking toward the entrance as if waiting for something more exciting than an ordinary flight. The barista behind the espresso machine glanced nervously at each newcomer, her smile tight, hands trembling over the portafilter. He settled into a corner seat, the leather cool beneath him, and set his duffel at his feet. Around him, executives tapped at laptops while a family struggled to keep their toddler from crawling under tables. But it was the guard from earlier, lean and pale, who caught Jason's eye. He hovered by the coffee stand, shifting weight from one foot to the other, head swiveling every few seconds as though expecting trouble at any moment. Jason's own heartbeat stuttered with unease. He flexed at the hips, adjusting the angle of his blade so it caught less light, less attention. Each click against the tile still felt amplified here, amplified by the collective awareness that something was about to happen. He recalled the rumors. Chuck Norris was on this flight, just beyond those doors. Whispers had chased him through the terminal, some fearful, some excited. A flight attendant exited a back hallway and paused, scanning faces before letting out a nearly inaudible sigh. Even she seemed caught between hope and worry. Jason closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He pictured the desert dust and the roar of combat, but also the steady calm that had followed, the perseverance that forged him stronger. When he looked up again, the lounge felt ready to snap, like the final moment before thunder breaks. He rose, bag slung over his shoulder, and moved toward the main seating area. Whatever was coming, he would face it with the same resolve that had carried him home. The lounge door slid open with a quiet hiss, and everything seemed to pause. A tall figure filled the frame, broad shoulders beneath a worn denim jacket, jeans that had seen countless miles, and boots that struck the floor with deliberate purpose. His hair was peppered gray, his posture relaxed yet impossibly strong. Conversations sputtered out as people turned, eyes widening. Even the anxious guard by the coffee stand froze mid-step. Chuck Norris moved without hurry, scanning the room with calm, unhurried precision. Light from the windows caught the edges of his jaw, and in that instant, the restless energy in the lounge coalesced into a single collective breath. He carried no weapon, only a small duffel and the silent authority of someone who had faced every test life could offer. He strode past the rows of chairs, the click of his boots a soft counterpoint to Jason's carbon fiber rhythm. Passengers shifted to make way, whispers trailing in his wake. "That's him. I can't believe it. Chuck Norris." A flight attendant stepped aside, eyes shining. Even the barista abandoned her latte art to watch his approach. Jason's heart thudded as Chuck paused a few feet away, the noise of the world shrinking around them. He caught sight of Jason next, the veteran's blades glinting in the afternoon light. Chuck's face softened with recognition, a hint of pride in his eyes. He lifted one hand in a small gesture of greeting. No fanfare, no grand speech, just the simple acknowledgement of a fellow soldier. In that moment, the lounge seemed to exhale. The guard's smirk vanished, replaced by a stiff respect that had nothing to do with policy or protocol. Chuck dropped his duffel beside Jason's and offered a nod that spoke louder than any words. "I've got you." The tension snapped, replaced by a quiet certainty that whatever came next, Jason would no longer stand alone. The guard's laughter cut through the hush like a knife. He'd spotted Jason standing beside Chuck, shoulders squared yet still trembling from the morning's ordeal. With a smirk, he called out, loud enough for half the lounge to hear, "Well, would you look at that? Got yourself a personal bodyguard now, Harper? Didn't know Norris came with a free upgrade." He slapped a nearby table, rattling coffee cups. Jason's cheeks flamed. What had stung before felt like a dull ache. This was a fresh gut punch. The guard grinned, emboldened by the amused murmurs around him. "Bet those fancy blades don't do much when you're out of line, huh? Better hope your celebrity friend can pull you through this time." Chuck didn't move. His presence alone stilled the crowd and the guard's bravado. Yet Jason's heart pounded in his throat, the guard's words echoing past the roar of engines. He opened his mouth, ready to answer, but the weight of public scrutiny pinned his tongue. A few seats down, travelers shifted uncomfortably. The guard caught eyes and leaned back, triumphant. Jason's fingers clenched around his duffel strap. His prosthetics, once a source of silent pride, felt like flashing targets. The cruel irony settled over him, mocked not for his service, but for the very tools that kept him walking. Chuck's gaze locked onto the guard, steady, unblinking, and cold as steel. Without a word, he stepped forward, narrowing the distance between them. Passengers leaned sideways to watch, breath held. The guard's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. Jason forced himself to meet the guard's eyes. No shame, no apology, just unflinching dignity. The guard swallowed and shifted on his feet. Chuck raised an eyebrow, silent but unmistakable in its warning. In that charged moment, the lounge held its collective breath, waiting to see whose resolve would crack first. The lounge fell quiet beneath the weight of Chuck's gaze. He stood a few feet from the guard, arms relaxed at his sides, but every muscle tuned and ready. His eyes, gray and steady, fixed on the man who had dared to mock Jason. In their depths was a calm authority that brooked no challenge. Chuck's head tilted ever so slightly, as if listening to an unspoken question. The guard swallowed, his bravado evaporating under that silent scrutiny. A bead of sweat traced down his temple, and his feet shifted restlessly on the carpet. No one moved to intervene. They knew instinctively that Chuck was not a man to provoke. Jason felt the tension ebb from his shoulders, replaced by something steadier. He glanced up at Chuck's eyes, watchful, protective, and unflinching. There was no anger there, only a clear message. No one would harm him again. He drew a slow breath, letting the promise of safety settle in his chest. Around them, travelers leaned forward in their seats, eyes darting between the pair. Even the barista paused mid-pour, cup balanced in hand. The guard's eyes flicked to the ground. His smirk had vanished, replaced by shame. At last, Chuck shifted his stance and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod to Jason. In that gesture was an unspoken vow to stand firm. The guard straightened, then mumbled an apology before scuttling away, every step a retreat from his earlier cruelty. As the lounge began to stir, voices low and hushed, Jason remained still. Chuck's watchful eyes swept over the crowd one more time, ensuring the moment had passed safely. Then, without a word, he turned and fell in a step beside Jason, two figures united by quiet resolve, moving forward together. The air between them seemed to thicken as boarding announcements crackled overhead. Every hum of a rolling suitcase echoed like distant thunder. Jason stood beside Chuck, shoulders squared, but his heart hammered in his chest like a warning drum. Around them, passengers straightened in their seats, sensing the charged moment and shifting uneasily. The guard who'd mocked Jason earlier hovered near the gate podium, eyes flicking toward the pair. His jaw clenched each time a flight attendant strode by, his posture rigid with guilt and resentment. He cleared his throat, as if summoning courage to speak again, but no words came. Instead, he jabbed a finger at his headset, stifling the impulse to intervene directly. Chuck's stance remained relaxed, feet planted shoulder-width apart, hands resting lightly at his sides, but his gaze never wavered. Jason could feel it a steady presence that kept the guard in check. The blades on his legs hummed softly each time he shifted weight, a quiet reminder of the strength he carried. A final boarding call rang out, and passengers rose as one, filing toward the gate. The guard straightened, inflicting a sour glance on Jason, but paused when Chuck's eyes met his. Tension crackled like static as the two men measured each other in silence. Around them, travelers slowed their forward steps, phones lifted, and cameras half-raised. The terminal lights reflected off polished floors, turning every blink into a strobe that punctuated the charged atmosphere. Jason inhaled, tasting resolve on his tongue. He was ready for whatever came next, humiliation or confrontation, knowing he wasn't alone. Chuck shifted slightly, a silent signal that they were aligned. The guard swallowed, shoulders twitching under that insistent stare. In that pregnant moment, the terminal held its breath, waiting for the tension to break one way or another. Chuck stepped forward through the cluster of passengers, moving as if his boots barely touched the floor. His approach was deliberate, each stride measured, projecting calm strength that cut through the hum of the terminal. Jason followed a half-step behind, feeling the weight of relief settle in his chest. Together, they closed the gap between themselves and the guard without a word. Passengers shifted aside, tilting their heads to catch sight of the unfolding moment. Flight crew paused mid-stride, hands hovering over scanners. The guard, still clutching his headset, straightened his spine as Chuck drew near. There was no swagger in Chuck's walk, only quiet authority that spoke louder than any raised voice. When they reached the guard, Chuck stopped at an even pace, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. He raised one hand in a gentle gesture, palm outward, fingers relaxed. The motion was small but unmistakable. Cease. The guard's tense shoulders sagged, the headset dropping from his ear. He swallowed hard, eyes flickering upward. Jason watched Chuck's face for signs of anger, but found only serene focus. In that moment, the guard seemed to shrink, as though the calm in front of him was more powerful than any reprimand could be. Chuck exhaled slowly, gaze never leaving the man's eyes. It was as if he was offering the chance to stand down, to admit wrong without humiliation. A soft announcement crackled over the speakers, signaling final call for boarding. The guard glanced at the doorway, then back at Chuck, torn between protocol and respect. Jason felt tension ripple through the crowd, but watched intently as Chuck dipped his head once, still silent. Finally, the guard nodded, lips pressing together. He reached up, straightened his uniform, and stammered, "I apologize, sir." His voice was low, but carried across the gate area. The hush lifted as fellow travelers exhaled, phones lowering. Chuck's hand dropped, and with the same quiet dignity, he turned and walked back toward Jason. No cheers erupted. There was no need, but the air felt lighter. Jason followed, each click of his blades sounding in harmony with Chuck's calm footsteps. In that steady cadence, he found new confidence. Authority could be wielded not with force, but with composed resolve. The guard straightened his cap and took a shuddering breath, eyes darting between Chuck and Jason. I didn't mean any offense," he stammered, voice wavering. "I was only following procedure. We have to check anyone with unusual equipment." His jaw tightened as he glanced at Jason's blades, as if seeing them for the first time. "It's my duty to ensure no one carries contraband or poses a risk." Chuck remained still, arms uncrossed, expression calm but unyielding. Jason's shoulders tensed. He felt the familiar burn of indignation rise again. The guard's denial wasn't an apology. It was a shield, hiding embarrassment and deflecting blame. Around them, travelers watched quietly, sensing the shift from personal insult to institutional excuse. "I understand security measures," Jason said softly, voice steady. "I've passed every check. But mocking a man for his service and his sacrifice isn't procedure, it's cruelty." He met the guard's eyes squarely. "Your job is to protect people, not humiliate them." The guard swallowed. He looked as though he wanted to shrink into his uniform. "Sir, protocol requires extra screening for medical implants." He motioned awkwardly to the scanner. "You know how it is." Chuck stepped forward, gaze never leaving the guard. "These aren't implants," he said quietly. "They're tools forged by loss and determination. Mocking them shows no respect for policy or for humanity." His tone carried the weight of conviction, rendering the guard's justification hollow. A flight attendant cleared her throat behind the guard, holding up a clipboard with boarding passes. The delay indicator had lifted. Passengers shifted, ready to move on. Faced with a silent chorus of disapproval, the guard's denial faltered. He exhaled, head bowed. "You're right," he said at last, voice low. "I'm sorry for how I behaved." The apology was simple, devoid of flourish, but in that moment, it carried the weight of admission. Jason nodded once, accepting it, and the guard stepped aside. As boarding resumed, the tension eased, leaving behind the understanding that dignity owed no explanation. Chuck stood motionless, shoulders relaxed but unyielding, as the guard's apology faded into the background hum of the terminal. His gaze drifted past the man, sweeping over the murmuring passengers and the emblem of the airline printed on the glass door. Without a word, he shifted his weight onto one boot, then the other, letting the silence speak. It was neither a threat nor a reprimand, just the quiet affirmation that right and wrong needed no embellishment. Jason watched Chuck's face, expecting some grand gesture. Instead, Chuck's expression was inscrutable, as if he were weighing an unseen scale. He lifted a single brow, barely a twitch, and held it there long enough for the guard to catch every nuance. The guard's posture straightened, shoulders dropping the tension they'd carried since first mocking Jason's blades. In that stillness, the guard understood. Conduct would be remembered far longer than any policy citation. After a moment that stretched like a held breath, Chuck nodded once, slow, deliberate. The movement wasn't an invitation or a dismissal. It was the final measure of judgment rendered. Compassion and strength intertwined in that simple motion, affirming Jason's dignity and calling the guard to a higher standard. Around them, the terminal exhaled, returning to its rhythm as travelers shuffled forward. Chuck turned toward Jason with the same silent certainty, and Jason felt the weight of his watchful presence lift from his shoulders. There was no need for congratulatory words or dramatics. The verdict lay in Chuck's calm posture and unwavering attention. Jason belonged here, unashamed and unbroken. Together, they stepped toward the gate, blades clicking in harmony with Chuck's even tread. Behind them, the guard stepped aside, face thoughtful, posture humbled. No one spoke as the final boarding call echoed through the speakers. Chuck's silent verdict had been delivered, and in its quiet power, every passenger knew what true honor looked like. Jason had barely taken 3 steps when the guard reappeared, eyes narrowing, a petty smirk curling at his lips as if nothing had happened. Chuck's stride slowed, each step measured and deliberate. The guard's confidence hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown anew. Without warning, Chuck shifted his weight onto one boot, pivoted, and delivered a precise palm strike to the guard's sternum. The impact landed with muted authority, sending the man reeling backward, breath rattling through his chest. A stunned hush washed over onlookers. The guard stumbled, one knee buckling as he clutched at empty air, his eyes wide in disbelief. Chuck stepped forward, voice low and firm, carrying more weight than thunder. He extended a steadying hand. "Honor is shown through respect, not ridicule," he said, palm bridging the gap between teaching and reprimand. "Remember that." The guard swallowed hard, shoulders sagging as Chuck's words settled in the charged silence. He nodded, grasping Chuck's hand in a silent acceptance of the lesson. Around them, the terminal exhaled. Phones lowered, murmurs faded, and the ambient clatter of boarding resumed as if the moment had been a necessary tremor to realign justice. Chuck released him gently and turned back to Jason, whose carbon fiber blades clicked softly in solidarity. No grand applause arose, only the renewed rhythm of travelers focusing on what truly mattered. In that precise strike, Chuck had wiped the guard smile clean off his face, not out of malice, but to honor the dignity Jason wore with every step. It was more than a blow. It was a testament to standing up for those who sacrifice, forging respect through action, and showing that true strength is wielded with measured grace. A ripple of astonishment swept through the terminal the moment Chuck's palm connected. Passengers froze mid-stride, coffee cups suspended in the air, boarding passes fluttering between fingers. An immediate hush fell, broken only by the guard's staggered exhale as he straightened, hand pressed to his chest. Eyes widened like saucers, cell phones lifted in shaky hands, and for a heartbeat the world held still. Then the shockwaves burst. A collective gasp ran from gate to gate, followed by whispers that spread like wildfire. "Did you see that? Is he okay? I can't believe it." Even the loudspeaker announcements seemed to falter as flight attendants exchanged incredulous glances. Security personnel materialized in a knot, eyes darting between the guard and the man who had just delivered a lesson in respect. Jason's heart pounded as he watched the scene unfold. The strike hadn't been about violence. It was a deliberate correction of injustice. He felt something shift beneath the terminal's fluorescent lights, a reordering of energy that made every click of his blades sound like soft applause. Strangers who had glanced at him with pity now nodded with understanding, as though they recognized the unspoken code of honor between those who bear scars. The guard, shoulders slumped, met Chuck's steady gaze and offered a small, contrite bow. In that moment, the two men stood as symbols of accountability and compassion, a testament that dignity deserves defense. Slowly, the terminal exhaled. Phones lowered, lines resumed their flow, and boarding calls resumed with renewed clarity. As Jason and Chuck turned toward the gate, the terminal seemed transformed, no longer a battleground of prejudice, but a space where one man's decisive act had reclaimed common courtesy. Travelers returned to their routines, carrying a story that would outlast the day's departures, a reminder that true strength radiates not from muscle, but from unwavering respect. A hush settled as Chuck guided Jason toward the center of the gate area, the guard trailing behind, head bowed. Eyes tracked their passage, some filled with curiosity, others with grudging respect. At the edge of the boarding queue, Chuck stopped and turned to face the small gathering of onlookers. He placed a firm hand on Jason's shoulder, then looked the guard in the eye and nodded. The guard took a shaky breath and cleared his throat. "I want to apologize," he said, voice barely above a whisper at first, then gaining strength as he met Jason's gaze. "I treated you unfairly. You defended our country. You have every right to be here with respect and gratitude, not mockery." His words carried across the terminal, drawing nods and murmured agreements. A flight attendant tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear and offered Jason a small, contrite smile. Nearby travelers shifted in their seats, some wiping misted eyes, others lowering phones in silent solidarity. Behind the guard, the airline staff exchanged glances and then stepped forward. One manager cleared his throat and added, "We are reviewing our procedures and providing sensitivity training immediately. Respect for every passenger is non-negotiable." Applause broke out, a gentle, heartfelt ripple rather than a roar, echoing through the concourse. Jason felt warmth bloom in his chest, not from pride, but from a knowledge that dignity had been restored not just for him, but for anyone who might one day face similar prejudice. Chuck offered Jason a brief, approving nod before turning back to the guard. No words passed between them. The lesson had been learned. Jason straightened, adjusting the strap of his duffel and flexing his blades, feeling the hum of collective empathy surround him. As boarding resumed, passengers parted with respectful distance, many offering Jason sympathetic smiles or pats on the back. He moved toward the gate with Chuck at his side, steps resonating with quiet confidence. The terminal had shifted from judgment to accountability, and Jason carried that change with him onto the jet bridge. Ahead, the plane waited, not just as a vessel to carry him home, but as a symbol of the respect he'd earned in full view of a public reckoning. Jason settled into the aisle seat as Chuck eased into the row beside him. The plane's engines hummed to life, but neither spoke until the seatbelt sign dinged off. Chuck turned, his gray eyes steady. "You handled that the way real heroes do," he said quietly, voice low enough only Jason could hear. Not with anger, but with strength born of purpose. Jason exhaled, the tension of the day finally loosening in his chest. He nodded, finding Chuck's words more powerful than any salute or medal. "Thank you," he replied, voice thick. "I just wanted to get home." Chuck smiled, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Home is for the living memories," he said. "Your scars tell a story of sacrifice, and you wear them without shame. That deserves respect." Across the aisle, a flight attendant offered a small, approving nod. In the seat behind, a businessman lifted his gaze from a tablet to offer Jason a soft thumbs up. The quiet acknowledgments gathered like gentle applause around them. Jason flexed his blades, surprised at how at ease he felt. "I've replayed today's events 100 times," he admitted. "Thought I'd broken something. My confidence, maybe." Chuck shook his head. "You didn't lose anything except their ignorance," he observed. "You taught everyone something they'll remember longer than any boarding call." A murmur of agreement rippled through neighboring rows. Passengers leaned forward, their eyes reflecting genuine admiration. Jason blinked, realizing that the respect he longed for had arrived through simple words, the right words spoken at the right moment. As the plane lifted off, Jason stared out at the shrinking terminal lights. Chuck's hand rested lightly on his, a steady reminder of solidarity. No grand gestures, no loud declarations, just honest words of respect that carried farther than any roar of engines. In that embrace of affirmation, Jason felt more grounded than he ever had, ready to walk forward into whatever came next. Jason and Chuck approached the gate together, boarding passes in hand. The agent behind the desk offered a respectful nod as she scanned each pass and returned them with a warm smile. Jason paused for a moment, letting the airflow of the jet bridge brush past his blades, and felt a surge of something he hadn't felt since he first stepped onto an aircraft after the injury: pride. He lifted his duffel onto his shoulder and moved forward, each click of carbon fiber announcing his presence not as something to mock, but as an emblem of survival. Flight attendants stepped aside, greeting him with genuine welcome aboard instead of wary glances. Fellow passengers rose to make room as he passed down the aisle, elbows gently yielding. A mother strapped her child into a window seat and whispered to the boy, who waved shyly at Jason. He offered a small, grateful smile in return. Chuck fell in beside him, offering an arm in case Jason needed support, though Jason felt steadier than ever. Together they reached the row reserved for veterans and elderly passengers, an unintended courtesy, perhaps, but one Jason accepted with quiet dignity. He slid into his seat, chest lifting as he settled. Chuck settled beside him and gave a gentle thumbs up that said, without words, "Well done." From his window, Jason watched ground crew busy around the plane, unaware that he had just reclaimed more than a seat. He had reclaimed his right to board without shame. As the cabin door clicked shut, the crew's overhead announcements felt like fanfare for a private victory. Jason buckled in, heart steady, pride filling every measured movement. The jet engines whirred to life, and the cabin lights dimmed to signal departure. Jason placed his hand atop his bag, fingertips brushing the fabric where his daughter's flag pin was stitched. He glanced at Chuck, who offered a reassuring nod. In that shared look, no applause, no spotlight, Jason understood that boarding a flight had shifted from an ordeal back to an ordinary privilege, and he would carry that pride with him, long after the wheels lifted off the runway. Jason leaned back against the headrest, the gentle rumble of the engines a steady lull beneath his thoughts. Through the oval window, clouds drifted by like silent witnesses to his journey, from the chaos of the terminal to this hushed sanctuary above the world. He traced the curve of his carbon fiber blade with one fingertip, marveling at how far he'd come since the blast that changed his life. He remembered the guard's sneer, the sting of laughter that once felt sharper than shrapnel. And he remembered Chuck's calm intervention, the way a single gesture restored his pride, how quiet strength could carry more weight than any loud rebuke. Jason closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the recycled air, letting the memory wash over him not as pain, but as proof of resilience. A soft click drew his attention. Chuck had shifted in his seat and offered Jason a thoughtful nod. No words were spoken. None were needed. That small reassurance carried the same force as the lesson delivered in the lounge. Dignity isn't given, it's defended. Jason's heart swelled with gratitude for a father who stood by him, and for the chance to walk through prejudice and emerge unbroken. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded photograph. Himself in uniform, flanked by fellow soldiers, faces bright with camaraderie. He tucked it back gently, alongside a note from his sister promising apple pie when he finally made it home. Ahead lay more than destinations on a map. There were family gatherings, therapy sessions, and charities he'd volunteer for, places where he could pay forward the respect he'd fought to reclaim. As the plane leveled out over a patchwork of fields, Jason allowed himself to smile. The sky outside might be boundless, but so, too, was the resolve rising within him. No longer defined by what he'd lost, he was defined by every hard-earned step he'd taken. The engines hummed on, and he closed his eyes again, ready for whatever came next. Jason shifted in his seat and glanced at Chuck, who was studying the passing clouds with that calm intensity of his. After a moment, Chuck spoke softly, "You've got a gift, Jason, a story that can guide others." His voice carried over the hum of the engines, warm and unhurried. Jason frowned, uncertain. "I don't know if my experiences mean much beyond my own fight." Chuck turned, offering a small smile. "They mean more than you think. Every step you took to reclaim your life can light a path for someone still lost." He paused, as if choosing his words like a master craftsman shaping wood. "When I was younger, I learned that strength isn't just muscle. It's empathy in action. You understand suffering and survival in ways few ever will. Sharing that isn't boasting. It's a duty." Jason let the words settle. Memories of the guard's mocking grin surfaced, but they were tempered now by Chuck's counsel. He looked away, tracing a line on his blade with his thumb. "Where do I even begin?" "Start small," Chuck advised. "Find another veteran who's struggling. Maybe someone you met in rehab or a local support group. Listen first, then offer what helped you. Patience, perseverance, a reminder that life still holds purpose." He paused, his eyes thoughtful. Leadership isn't about telling people what to do. It's about showing them what's possible. A soft ding announced the start of the descent, but neither man moved. Jason felt a surge of resolve. He pictured the families he'd meet on the ground, the wounded soldiers still wrestling with doubt. "I can do that," he said, voice steady. Chuck nodded. "You will. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply being there." He reached across the aisle and tapped Jason's arm. "You've already proven you can stand tall in the face of judgment. Now you'll help others do the same." As the plane dipped toward the runway, Jason allowed himself a true smile. For the first time that day, he felt not only ready to land, but to lead. They stepped off the jet bridge and into the bright terminal, the midday light greeting them like old friends. Jason carried his duffel over one shoulder, the weight now familiar. Around them, travelers wheeled luggage or hurried to connecting flights, but for a moment everything slowed. Chuck turned to Jason at the gate exit. His eyes held pride and warmth. "This is where I part ways," he said, voice gentle. He reached out and clasped Jason's forearm in a firm, steady grip. No fanfare, just honest connection. "Remember what we talked about. You have the strength to guide others." Jason nodded, feeling the surge of gratitude rise in his chest. "Thank you for everything," he replied, voice catching. He wanted to say more, for the punch that shattered animosity, the words that restored his dignity, the counsel that set his course. But the airport's bustle beckoned, and there were things he needed to do on his own. Chuck gave a small smile, eyes crinkling. "I'll be watching," he said lightly, then slipped a folded card into Jason's hand. "Reach out if you ever need a reminder." Jason glanced down at the card, Chuck's personal number for unexpected doubts, and folded it into his pocket. They stood in companionable silence, the echo of their footsteps blending with distant announcements. Then Chuck stepped back, a casual nod of farewell. "Go be the mentor you were born to be," he said. Jason watched as Chuck melted into the flow of passengers, heading toward the arrivals hall. He drew in a steady breath and turned to the exit doors, feeling resolve settle into his shoulders. Outside, the world awaited, with missions to complete, veterans to uplift, and a future shaped by every step he'd taken. With Chuck's guidance still echoing in his mind, he walked forward into his next chapter. Jason stepped through the sliding doors into the arrival hall, the roar of applause greeting him before he even saw his family. A line of veterans, clad in ceremonial dress and uniforms fresh from the presses, stood at attention along the corridor. Between them, signs reading, "Welcome Home, Sergeant Harper," fluttered gently in a morning breeze from the open doors. His heart thumped, not from nerves, but from the swell of something deeper. His sister appeared first, waving wildly beside his niece, who clutched a homemade banner scrawled with glittery letters. Behind them, his parents pressed forward, eyes shining, arms outstretched. The veterans lowered their salutes in unison as he passed, each one offering nods of acknowledgement that felt as meaningful as any medal. He swallowed against the lump in his throat and picked up his pace. His daughter ran forward, flinging herself into his side with a laugh that echoed through the hall. His sister enveloped him in a bear hug, and his mother brushed away tears as she smoothed the collar of his jacket. His father shook his hand firmly, pride blazing on his face. Jason's blades clicked against the tile as he knelt to embrace his niece, her small arms pressing into his chest as though she could shield him from every hardship. Above the welcome line, a local news crew captured the moment. Reporters leaning from behind cameras, capturing the embrace that spoke of sacrifice, resilience, and love. Jason stood, shoulders squared, and met their lenses with calm determination. He offered a single salute to the veterans behind him, a silent vow that he would honor their camaraderie by lifting up others. A buffet of home-cooked dishes waited at a long table off to one side. His sister's cinnamon rolls, his mother's chicken soup, his father's famous barbecue ribs. But Jason barely noticed the aroma. He was too busy gathering his family close, feeling their warmth fill the hollow spaces war had left behind. As they walked toward the waiting cars, each step felt lighter, buoyed by the cheers that still trailed him. In their celebration, he found a new mission, to be the hero they saw and to guide others home, just as he had been guided back to this moment. Jason stood at the edge of a sunlit community hall, the chatter of veterans and volunteers buzzing around him like a familiar drumbeat. Behind a simple wooden table, a younger soldier walked in with uncertain steps. His uniform crisp, his eyes haunted by questions Jason once knew too well. The room fell quiet as Jason stepped forward, feeling the weight of experience and possibility mingling in his chest. He offered the young man a steady smile and extended a hand that had known both combat and compassion. "Welcome," Jason said, voice warm but grounded. "I'm Jason Harper. You're safe here." The soldier's shoulders relaxed fractionally, relief flickering across his lined features. Around them, the mentorship circle formed, a mosaic of veterans leaning in, ready to listen to guide. Jason motioned for his new protege to sit with him. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the small card Chuck Norris had given him at the gate, a reminder of faith and connection. He placed it gently on the table. "This found me when I wasn't sure I belonged anywhere," Jason explained. "Now it's yours. Let it remind you that you're never alone." The young soldier's eyes glistened as he picked up the card, reading the scrawled message, "Strength in purpose." A hush settled, broken only by soft nods and the rustle of chairs shifting closer. Jason leaned forward, sharing the lessons he'd learned. How dignity is defended in everyday acts, how empathy can heal, how each step forward is its own victory. As he spoke, Jason felt the thread of his own journey weaving into the fabric of this new story. The carbon fiber blades that carried him here seemed to hum with pride, the legacy of resilience passing into eager hands. When he finished, he looked around at the circle, faces reflecting hope and determination, and knew the torch had been passed. Outside, sunlight warmed the sidewalk. The young soldier stepped forward, card in hand, confidence blooming in his posture. Jason took a steady breath, heart full, and watched him disappear into a new beginning. Mission accomplished. The future was in good hands.